Hey there, thanks for stopping by to check out my channel. Here we go with another classic clone versus real deal side-by-side comparison video. In this case, we're going to be comparing the H&K MR556A4, which is a civilian H&K 416A5 essentially, to the Brownells BRN4, which is Brownells' version of the H&K 416. The thing is, this unit comes to market at about $3,500 for a complete rifle, or $2,200 to $2,400 for an upper receiver kit, versus the Brownells comes to market at like $1,200 to $1,400, depending on configuration. Now, anytime you have a clone come to market at that much more of an affordable price point, you got to ask yourself, how does it perform versus the real deal? Well, in this video, we're going to find out how these two actually stack up. So my plan is to take a look at short range performance. I fired a handful of rounds at targets, maybe 10 yards away to get an idea of rapid fire feel, recoil impulse. Then we'll take a look at 100-yard groups with a couple of different bullets and loads. And then we're going to push the distance on each of these out to standard distances for a carbine like this. And at the end of the video, we're going to wrap up and I'll summarize what it's like to run these two rifles side by side and give you my opinion on how the clone compares to the real deal. Now, really quick, before we get into it, if you enjoy this kind of content, I got to ask for your help to grow this channel. It's simple. Hit that subscribe button. Let me know you want to see more content just like this. Every time you subscribe, it's going to encourage me to pump out new content, and it's going to signal to the industry that you enjoy and value the work that I'm doing. Now, if you're clicking on this video, I'm guessing you're probably familiar with the H&K 416. If you're not though, really quick, what is the HK 416? Well, you think about global war on terror, we're putting a ton of rounds through M4s in crazy conditions, and in some cases, maybe they're not the most reliable system. So I understand certain units, maybe in the early 2000s, went to HK, said, hey, we need a more reliable M4 style rifle to take overseas. And H&K came up with the 416. So it's going to be a piston driven system. Piston driven, that's going to keep a lot of the extra gas and fouling out of the upper receiver group to increase reliability. So the short stroke gas piston, that is the heart of an H&K 416. The benefit is extreme reliability. These rifles have a reputation for running in pretty much all conditions. Sand, water, you name it. I understand they are just the most reliable AR on the market. So this rifle, as it sits right here, this essentially is a civilian version of the HK 416. So this is the H&K MR556A4 that HK released at SHOT Show earlier this year. Very much what the military would be using as the A5, or certain military groups would be using as the A5. It's going to have an adjustable gas block on it, so it's going to be suppressed versus normal firing. It's going to have an 11-inch barrel on it because of the adjustable gas block. The A4 on the civilian side is going to have a new slimmer rail with M-LOK slots on it, so I really like how this feels. It's going to have ambi lower, so it's going to have a bolt release on the right-hand side, mag release on the left-hand side, ambi charging handle, ambi safety. So far, I really like what this MR556A4 is. So at this point, I got to give a shout out to H&K because they did help me acquire this rifle through their industry purchase program. So I do have money invested in this, but I did use their industry program to purchase it at a discounted rate. Just want that disclosure out there as we work through this video. Like I say, a couple hundred rounds on this thing, and so far I love shooting it. I really like the recoil impulse of this rifle, and so far it's been 100% reliable. The one thing I have noticed, the trigger could use some work. We need somebody in the aftermarket to help us out with an A4 trigger for these MR556s. But anyway, real deal, essentially H&K 416 right here. This rifle is going to have an EOTech EXPS3-4 holographic sight on it. I'm going to zero that at 50 yards, which is good for 200 yards. And then it's got a BDC in it to allow me to shoot out to, say, 600 yards using the dots in it. Now, because this is a shorter barrel than it's calibrated for, I am going to have to tweak that a little bit. It's going to be good for something like 350, 450, and 550 yards, but it's going to be close enough for what we're going to do in this video. And then I have a G45 5X magnifier on it here that I will use to shoot, say, 100-yard groups, as well as steel out at distance. Now, this rifle has a B&T Print XH RBS suppressor on it. So this is going to be the full-size B&T can. This is a Silencer Shop exclusive. So at this point, I got to give a shout out to Silencer Shop for coming on board to support my channel, certainly through this suppressor, but all of my NFA transfers. There's no better time to get in the NFA suppressor or Form 1 game than right now. Wait times are down. It is nuts how fast approvals are coming back. I want to say this can was just a couple days for me. The lower was less than a week when I Form 1'd it. All of that through the Silencer Shop single shot trust, as well as using my online profile just to submit that paperwork electronically. It is so simple to get NFA paperwork submitted through Silencer Shop. So if you're looking to get an NFA game, make sure you're doing it through Silencer Shop. So thank you for their support. On this can, just really quick, the first thing I noticed about it when I took it out is it is so stinking light. So this is gonna be a 3D printed titanium, and I believe portions of it are Inconel, maybe like the blast baffles, etc. It's supposed to cut down on sparking at night, which, full disclosure, this thing does have quite a bit of flash after dark. But you think about titanium, it's known for heating up fast. Inconel is just very, very tough. So a couple hundred rounds on this can so far, and right now the thing I notice is just how nice it is on the front of this rifle. Almost no extra weight being primarily titanium, and it's holding up well on this 11-inch barrel. So this is going to be the H&K that we shoot. Now we're going to be comparing it to the Brownells BRN4 upper. So this upper was sent to me by Brownells. Brownells came on board to support me earlier this year, and one of the ways they're doing that is by providing this upper to allow me to create content. Now, if you find yourself interested in purchasing a BRN4 or you want to help me out, make sure when you go to Brownells to make your purchase, use my code MULLET, as that's going to get you 10% off of qualified purchases over $150. It's going to give me a small kickback that I use to create content here on the channel. So thank you to Brownells for providing this upper receiver group for me to create content. So the Brownells BRN4 is an exact clone of the 416. Now this is going to be a true 416 clone in that it's a 10.4-inch barrel versus the newer 11-inch. And it has a non-adjustable gas block up here, but it's still the same piston operating system. It's got a Midwest Industries M-LOK handguard on it, which feels and looks very similar to the handguard on the A4. And I understand some of the components on this, such as the handguard, will actually interchange with the H&K. So the BRN4 is an exact clone of the HK 416, but it comes to market, say, at roughly half the cost. So I went ahead and threw it on my Griffin Mk2 lower. So Brownells sells these as an upper receiver group. This is a complete upper receiver group, so you got to add a lower. It'll go on any AR lower. I love the Mk2s from Griffin because of the ambi control. So similar right-hand bolt release to the HK, ambi safety, ambi mag release, flared mag well, and it allows me to run an LMT SOP-mod stock. This one actually has the Griffin 2-stage trigger in it, so the trigger pull on this rifle is significantly better than the MR556. Just keep that in mind as we work through the video. Suppressor on this is going to be the Griffin HRT 30 caliber can. This is going to be a very, very heavy duty can, and it pairs very well with this upper. For an optic solution on this, I'm really pumped about this actually. So this is going to be the Griffin 3X prism sight with their ICO BDC reticle in it. So I've been looking for something to do with this optic. Little 3X prism like this is small, it's lightweight, it's got a BDC. I thought, man, it would be perfect for this video where I'm going to be running it alongside an EOTech. This thing, you're going to zero it at 100 yards. It's got a chevron in it. And then I'm going to be able to true it up actually to use the BDC out to distance. I think you're going to be shocked at how well the BDC actually works on this 10.4-inch barrel. So optic solution from Griffin Armament. And then on the side here, I've actually mounted the offset Infatac. So this thing is going to help me identify warm targets really quickly up close just by canning the rifle. And I could also take some snapshots there. So again, if you're curious what this is, check out Infatac because it will help you find warm targets if you catch my drift there. So this is going to be the rifle we compare it to. Again, price point on this thing as configured. I would say this upper, I want to say is about $1,400. Lower here, you're probably a couple of $300 to $400. Significantly lower cost, say roughly half the cost of the full H&K rifle. So the last piece is going to be ammo. With short barrels like this, I wanted to have the best chance of accuracy and being able to push the distance. So shout out to Phantom Defense for sending me their 77 grain OTM load in the NAS3 cases. So these are going to be much higher velocity due to that hybrid case. 77 grain has a beautiful reputation for accuracy and distance capability. So that's what we're going to be running out to distance. This stuff is going to be running beautifully out of both rifles. I promise you, there's going to be a ton of hits. Now, before we move into the shooting portion, you got to let me know in the comments down below, how far do you think I can effectively push each of these setups on a man-sized target? 300 yards, 400 yards? I've got to hear it. And then at the end of the video, you've got to let me know what your expectation was now versus the performance we actually saw. So with that, let's get into the shooting portion of the video. Here we go, 100-yard performance with each rifle. I fired the BRN4 up the left-hand side with 3 loads, and then the HK up the right-hand side, 3 loads, 5-round groups. Now it's worth noting the BRN4, I zeroed at 100 yards. That's the way the chevron and that Griffin prism is designed. And then the HK is a 50-yard zero, and that's why the impacts are a little bit high. That's just how kind of the trajectory works, so this is very normal for point of impact. So let's review the results. So the first load in what each rifle is zeroed for is the Phantom Defense 77 grain in the NAS 3 casing, so a little bit higher velocity. First up, I fired 5 rounds of the BRN4 right here, which went into a really nice, actually I believe the smallest group of the day, at 1.6 MOA. Average velocity out of the 10.4 inch barrel is 24.99. Then you can see spread and SD down below. The HK, I fired 5 rounds, and this group is larger than expected. So the HK group is 2.9 MOA for 5 rounds. Interesting though, average speed out of the 11-inch barrel is 24.90. So I expected the 11-inch to be a little bit faster, but right here results are almost identical with a little bit less spread and SD, which is good for long range. But this is what we're going to be shooting at to distance. This is my zero. So 1.6 versus 2.9, the BRN is showing an advantage there with that load. I then fired 5 rounds of the IMI 77 grain. We'll start with the BRN4, which would be these 5 rounds right here. Now 4 rounds are pretty tight with a 5th round that flew outside of the group. These all felt like good shots to me, so we're going to count them all. 5 rounds in total is 3.47 MOA, so pretty large actually. That would be the worst group. So we go from the best group of the day to the worst group of the day. Average speed of 24.17, so you can see that brass case is running, you know, about 80 feet per second slower than the NAS 3. Spread and SD look to be about the same, but man, that's a pretty large group with 77 grain match ammunition. The HK on the right hand side fired its best group of the day with the IMI. These 5 rounds landed in 1.93 MOA, so just under 2 MOA. I was hoping for better out of this rifle, but it is what it is. Average speed of 24.22. Again, velocity is almost identical between the 2 different barrel lengths. You got to let me know in the comments, is that what you expected? Because I was expecting to see a little bit of an increase in the longer HK barrel, but it's just not there. And then last up at the top, we fired 5 rounds of Wolf Gold 55 grain. So this is just ball plinking ammunition like probably most of us will be running through these rifles. BRN4 on the left-hand side. This group is going to be 2.94 MOA. So just under 3 MOA, which is fine for kind of what the rifle is. Average speed of 25.94. And then spread actually pretty good at 35 with an SD of 11. Now you think about where these rifles are going to be used. It's likely with this ammunition, closer distances against torso type targets. That's going to get the job done, really no problem. When I push out to distance, I'm looking for a little bit better. But this, I believe, is a good indication of where most of us will be using these rifles. The HK, 5 rounds right here, one's up in the cardboard, but these 5 rounds went into 2.56 MOA, so a little bit better than the BRN4. Velocity of 25.71, so it's actually slower than the BRN4, which is interesting to me. Spread is massive at 134 and SD of 52, so that's pretty rough, but ultimately very usable for what the rifle is intended for. Now, a couple of points I want to make right here. When you average out the 3 groups with each rifle, I get an average accuracy out of the BRN4 of 2.67 MOA and an average accuracy of the HK of 2.46 MOA. That's with red dots, low magnification, but you got to let me know, is that in line with what you expected out of each rifle? I can't wait to hear that from you. For me, it's a little bit bigger than I was expecting out of the HK. I was expecting the HK across all groups to be sub 2 MOA and pushing 1 MOA. But that is what it is. Now, when we shoot out to distance, I'm going to be using the Griffin Prism with this Phantom load right here. The way the BDC is designed in that, from what I can tell, the data is going to be pretty close, within a couple of tenths of a mil out to at least 500 or 600 yards. For the EOTech, where it's got a 50, 200 yard zero, and then 3 dots down below, running the numbers, it looks to me like my first dot below is going to be 325 yards, second dot will be 450, and then the last dot will be 565. So just a little bit different than what it's calibrated for out of a 14.5-inch barrel, but this is the solution. Now let's push out and start engaging steel with each rifle. I set up my steel. I have a 2/3 dipstick on the right and a full size on the left. Now, given these are fairly close range rifles, let's put our first rounds here, maybe in the ballpark of 100 yards or a little over. Now, given this puppy 0 to 100, I'm just going to hold dead on with that Griffin. So we'll start on the full size. 2/3. All right, no problem with the BRN4. Let's try the HK. Now the HK with the 50-yard zero. Let's dump the magnifier. It's gonna land just a little bit high. Ooh, gotta turn up my brightness. So I'll just hold center dot, kind of dead center of the plates. 2/3. Ooh, pulled those two. There we are. So, you know, man-sized targets within normal ranges for these, no problems. Alrighty, I've moved back a little bit further. This time I'm gonna use my Vectronic Vector X's and get you an actual distance, since I know we're beyond kind of a, you know, close distance. 322 yards. We'll go ahead and start here with the HK. Now the HK, I'm gonna go ahead and flip the magnifier up. Remember, it had a 50, 200-yard zero, and the first dot down was like 350. So I'm just going to hold, let's see here, something like, I'm gonna put that first dot down the bottom edge of the plate. Pack. Pack. Let's try the 2/3. Left edge. Pack. Pack. Full size. Impact. So BDC seems pretty close. Now with this puppy, it's zeroed up with the BDC, so I'm just gonna put it kind of centered up in the plate. Pack. 2/3. Pack. Lift the right edge. Pack. Pack. Full size. Impact. So 320 yards. Both rifles are more than capable of man-sized target. We move back a bit further, and now we're really gonna start to push the distance on these. So I'm gonna start with the BRN and the Griffin optic, and I wanna use the rangefinder and the reticle to see if I can figure out the distance. So I'm gonna put that on my 18-inch target. And feels like about 400. The width of the Stadia, definitely not 500. So we must be between 4 and 5. And with that, I'm gonna put the 400-yard hash kind of upper chest. I'm gonna cheat right edge of plate, full size. Pack. Pack. Okay, let's try the 2/3. Off the right edge. Right edge. Okay, let's go back to the full size. I can't get a good call on the miss. Definitely right edge. Pack. Pack. Try the 2/3 again. Impact. So for that, I cheated into the upper left shoulder. Now here we go with the HK. Now remember the HK, my third dot down or second up from the bottom should be about 450. So I'm gonna hold that kind of in the belly, or say bottom edge of full size. Straight up for wind. Pack. Pack. High left, I believe. No call. All right, I had to cheat down a bit. Let's try the 2/3. Back to the full size. Impact. So had to kind of finesse my hold a little bit. The BDC actually wasn't as close as the Griffin optic was. All right, I loaded up a handful more in the HK now that I know roughly where my hold should be. Let's try that. So now I've got the second dot kind of top of chest. So there's our impacts. A little bit of windage miss there, but you can see once I got my hold, I'm able to connect on that full size, no problem. Now I've moved back and we're really gonna push the boundaries on these rifles. So these rocks are about 650 yards. So I'm gonna go ahead and look out there. Let's just use the Ranger. I know you can't see it, but you know, I can tell it's definitely beyond 5. The 600 hash seems to actually match up just about right. What I'm going to do is just I'm going to put the 600 yard BDC in the head and squeeze around and see where we're at. Okay, so quite a bit left. So I've got windage dots in there. Let's come over to the first windage dot. Impact. Now that's sick. Impact. Left edge. Impact. Ooh, wind is picking up. Second windage dot. Okay, off the right edge. And we're dry there. So how cool is that? 650 yards with a 10.4 inch. I tell you what, man, the BDC in this optic is legit with the wind holds, and that Phantom Defense ammo, that higher velocity makes this possible. So now let's try the HK. Same position and target array with the HK. Now this one, slightly different BDC in that my bottom dot, I calculated for like 565 yards. Now, seems to be trending a bit higher. It's probably about 600. So I'm just going to put that bottom dot head level, and I'm going to favor right a plate width. Okay, off the left edge. That was an impact. 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 Well, let's try the 2/3. Left edge. Right edge. Now let's go back to the full size. Impact. Impact. All right, so who did it better? Short barrels at 650 yards, man, I tell you what, that is really cool. I think that Phantom Defense ammo with the higher velocity is just nuts. So let's wrap up and I'll give you my thoughts on them. Well, there it is, a side-by-side look at how the real deal H&K MR556A4 stacks up to the Brownells BRN4 out to distance. You gotta let me know in the comments what you thought about the performance of the BRN4. I tell you what, I am super impressed with the performance of this upper. This thing was a ton of fun to shoot. So let me chat through my experience while you're letting me know what you thought down below. Now, I didn't show it in the video previously, but I did fire both of these upper receiver groups at my new Infinity kind of rubber targets there at close range, maybe 10 yards. Did a couple of rapid fire transition type strings, you know, double taps, rapid fire, etc., just to get an idea of recoil impulse. And I tell you what, I don't do a ton of that style shooting, but to me, the recoil felt the same. My ability to stay on target in those double taps or maybe putting one round, you know, up into the head box quickly felt the same to me. I didn't feel maybe a ton of difference between these two. So recoil impulse, shooting experience at close distances, to me, I would say was comparable. Reliability was 100% as you would expect on both rifles throughout the full video. I do remember one time when the BRN4 didn't lock back on an empty mag, But aside from that, reliability was 100% as expected. Now, 100-yard accuracy, to me this is pretty interesting. So when you look at the groups we fired a number of them there with the 77 grain Phantom, the 77 grain IMI, and the 55 grain Wolf. The best 5-round group of the day came out of the BRN4 at 1.6 MOA. That was pretty shocking. I was actually really surprised by how tight that group was. Now, the largest group of the day also came out of the BRN4 at something like 3.5 MOA. Now, when you look at those three groups together and you average them, this upper averaged 2.67 MOA. Now, the purpose of these short uppers like this would be man-sized targets at close range, maybe out to 2, maybe 300 yards. 3 MOA, that's going to get the job done, and you saw they're capable of much more than that in this video. So accuracy-wise, I was happy with the BRN4. I think it shows a lot of potential with that Phantom Defense 77 grain load. The H&K, on the other hand, interesting. You know, you saw me there, the first run through, the 77 grain Phantom shot out like 2.9 MOA group, which is bigger than I expected and had hoped for. And the best group on the first run was something like 1.8 MOA, which was, again, kind of bigger. I believe it was 1.9 MOA with the IMI. Bigger than I was expecting there. Now, after I shot the full video, I noticed my magnifier here was loose in the mount. I don't know if that impacts accuracy. I did tighten it down and go back through and refire groups, and I saw the 77 grain Phantom Defense shrink to 2.1 MOA, which again, I'd like to see a little bit better, but this is an EOTech. But you look at the average there on the second run through, it was 1.88 MOA. So almost 1 MOA better on the average than the BRN4. Now, ultimately, both uppers are very capable of taking man-sized shots out to distance, and we showed that. But again, I'd like to hear in your comments what you think about the loose magnifier potentially impacting accuracy. To me, when I ran through and saw all three groups tighten up, I do feel like the magnifier being loose impacted the performance the first time through. So from an accuracy standpoint, I would say they're both very good for what they're intended to do. Now from there, we moved out and shot steel. We shot both of these, you know, at about 200 yards. I didn't range it. I just kind of threw both of them up and engaged the full-size Zipsic as well as the 2/3 Zipsic. About 200 yards, that's probably the max distance many of you said earlier in the video would be where you would run a rifle like this. We hammered. I mean, the only times we miss is when I had bad shots or bad form. So that's 200 yards. They both were perfect. We moved back, you know, and shot something like 350 yards. And once again, very impressed with the accuracy, very capable with that Phantom Defense 77 grain ammo. I'm going to skip out to the 650 yard line. I'm sure 650 yards is beyond what pretty much any of you would have said earlier in the video as being an effective or capable range of either one of these uppers. And what sticks out in my mind at 650 yards is how good this BRN4 performed, and the fact that the reticle in this 3X Prism from Griffin was almost spot on. Pretty much held the 600 yard hash just a little bit higher on the target, and we hammered the full-size Zipsic. That's a 10.4-inch barrel with a 3X Prism optics, hammering a torso at 650 yards. That alone, so the accuracy capability to engage a man-sized target with this upper out to 600-ish yards, 100% reliability, and the price point to me make this an absolute win. Now, we saw great accuracy in the HK throughout the video. Even with the magnifier being loose throughout the firing portion, we had no problems making hits at each of the distances where we shot. You know, we saw off of the four-wheeler there, plenty of impacts off of the rocks at 650. The one thing I did notice here, to me, the EOTech, the BDC was off a little bit, but even at 650 yards, once I figured out my hold on that final dot there on the bottom, I was able to reliably connect. So from an accuracy standpoint, I was impressed with the BRN4. It actually outperformed my expectations. And in my opinion, they both are very much equal when they're equipped like a fighting rifle, just like this. So that's kind of my assessment. I'd be curious to hear what your thoughts are. So kind of the final question I want to end with here is, what do I think about the BRN4 upper, the price point, and how it compares to the real deal? Well, I'm going to end the video by saying I'm really impressed with the BRN4. Now, understand BRNs or Brownells sent this to me free of charge, but I would be willing to spend my own money on this based on what I've seen out of it so far. The accuracy capability of, you know, average 2.6 MOA, with the best group being 1.6 MOA, and the ability to engage a man-sized target with a 3X Prism optic out to 600 yards was very much in line with what the H&K did and actually outperformed it in some cases. So far, really happy with the BRN4. You got to let me know what your thoughts are. Do you have a BRN4, and what's your experience been? What do you want to see me do with this upper? Is there anything that you think I missed in this comparison? I tell you what, I had an absolute blast making this one. I'm really excited to get to bring the BRN4 to the channel here, as well as the MR556A4. But for those of you that are in the market for a BRN4, in my opinion, it does hold up to the real deal, at least in the kind of testing and the kind of shooting where I would be using these. So if you enjoyed this video, do me a solid, hit that like button, make sure you're subscribed, and let me know what you thought about the video. There's a ton of content coming, so I hope you'll stick around to join me.